Hello students, I am Dr. G.S. Sodhi. Today I bring to you the next learning episode in BSc Forensic Science on behalf of the content writers, myself and Ms. Deepika Bhandari on an important unit of paper Crime and Society, that is organized crime, in which we will discuss about organized crime, various definitions of organized crimes along with its history. We will also discuss classification and characteristics of organized crime along with the status of organized crime in India and laws related to it. We will wind up the module with discussion of current scenario of such crimes. Let us start our lecture with a look at what we are going to learn today. Module number 1 is Introduction of Organized Crime. This includes the definition of organized crime. Module number 2 is History of Organized Crime. Module number 3 is the classification of organized crime. Module number 4 is Characteristics of Organized Crime or Criminals. Module number 5 is Organized Crime in India. Module 6 is Organized Crime Laws in India. Module 7 is Current Trends of Organized Crime. And finally, Module 8 is the conclusion. Criminology is a global phenomenon. With the advancement of time and development of knowledge and technology, the complexities of life have multiplied, with the result that antisocial elements think it is profitable to embrace criminality as a profession to earn their livelihood. This has provided opportunities to criminals to organize themselves into criminal gangs. In the modern age of science and technology, new techniques of crimes are being used by gangsters to perpetrate crime. Generally speaking, organized crime is an act which is committed by two or more criminals as a joint venture in a systematically organized manner. It is an illegal act which the members of an unlawful association commit with mutual cooperation and adventure. Dr. Walter Rackets defines organized crime as an unlawful misadventure which is carried by a boss, his lieutenants and operators who form a hierarchical structure for a specific period. Organized crimes may be defined as unlawful activities of members of a highly organized, disciplined association engaged in supplying illegal goods and services, including but not limited to gambling, prostitution, loan sharking, narcotics, labor racketeering and other unlawful activities of members of such associations. The International Police Information Agency, that is Interpol, in its conference held in May 1988 suggested that organized crime means any group having a corporate structure whose primary objective is to obtain money through illegal activities, often surviving on fear and corruption. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, that is UNDOC, report of the year 2010, organized crimes are result of market forces rather than the plotting of dedicated criminal groups. Demand for drugs, prostitution, cheap labor, firearms, wild animal parts, child pornography and trafficking of other contraband generates groups of organized criminals who carry on these illegal activities by the use of violence, intimidation, corruption and other illegal means. According to Selin, organized crime resembles those economic adventures or enterprises which are organized to carry on illegal activities. He further observed that organized crime is synonymous with economic enterprises carried through for the purpose of conducting illegal activities and which, when they are operating legitimate ventures, do so by illegal means. The purpose of such activities is to amass huge profits through illegal means. The largest share of the profits, however, goes to the manager and kingpin of the entire circuitous enterprise, for example, prostitution, smuggling, bootlegging, gambling or racketeering. Commenting on organized crimes, Donald Taft observed that the organization of criminals introduced in the field of crime those factors of leadership, group discipline, obedience, loyalty, division of labor, fellowmanship, sacrifice, cooperation and group planning which spell efficiency in the normal economic, political and social life. The professional criminals who organize themselves into criminal gangs are often the habitual and hardened offenders who have embraced criminality as a regular profession in their life. Edwin Sutherland rightly observes that there is at least one thing common among these criminal organizations, that is, they are bound together by a common hostility towards law and therefore the members assist and protect each other from law enforcing authorities. Since protection against arrest and detection is a necessary part of organized crimes, gangsters too often adopt the technique of fixing crimes, which is far more important than executing them. For this purpose, they try to win over police officials by underhand tactics or use of threat, undue influence or coercion against the victim in order to refrain him from making a complaint to the police. That apart, organized criminals also have to seek cooperation and support from some parallel legitimate business organizations for disposing of their illegally earned money, property or commodity. Thus, organized crimes involve a number of accessory activities for the smooth conduct of their underworld profession. Different types of criminal organizations that may operate in the criminal world can be categorized into the following heads. First, organized predatory crime. Second, crime syndicates. Third, criminal rackets. Fourth, political graft. We take up the first one, the organized predatory crime. Crimes which do not involve any kind of service to the affected person or persons are called predatory crimes. It is therefore essentially a one-way transaction in as much as the gangsters by committing such crime enjoy the entire benefit themselves without any apparent or actual service to the victim. There is no repentance among the gangsters, although they are conscious of the opposition of law-abiding society. Juvenile and delinquents and occasionally offenders generally turn into professional gangsters in the course of time. Commenting on this tendency, John Landesco observed that in some delinquency area, the choice of professional career in crime is as natural to the criminal as the choice of a legitimate career may be elsewhere. The noted criminologist Sutherland opines that members of the professional criminal gangs require greater skill and planning than the occasional criminals. Their professionalization involves not only the execution of crime, but prior location of spots and preparation for escape from punishment in case of detection. Some of the predatory crimes which commonly occur are theft, dacoity, extortion, kidnapping and pickpocketing. The peculiar characteristic of a predatory crime is that the victim of this crime is a total loser without any material gain or advantage or surface from the offender. Thus, in a predatory crime, the exploitation of the victim is so conspicuous that entire society reacts to it. A few criminals join together to organize into a gang and carry on criminal activities as a joint venture. The gangs of dacoits, kidnappers and smugglers and pickpockets operate almost everywhere, carrying out their organized criminal activities as professionalized ventures. Of late, the emergence of terrorism as an organized form of predatory crime has endangered peace and security. It is to be found in different forms such as political terrorism, religious terrorism, narco-terrorism, etc. It basically involves violence and killing, thus posing a serious law and order problem for the state administration. The dissemination of new technology and weapons has facilitated the growth of terrorism. Though the root of terrorism or extremism lie in ethnic or religious fundamentalism, it has proved a boon for professional criminals to carry on their criminal activities in a planned manner for dubious goals. The second is crime syndicates. The term crime syndicate refers to a gang of criminals engaged in the business of providing some forbidden or illegal service to the customers who are desirous of having it and are willing to pay handsomely for that service. Crime syndicates operate because of the availability of market for certain illegal prohibited services. Thus, gambling, bootlegging, commercialized prostitution, supply of narcotic drugs and other intoxicants are mostly carried on by the syndicates of criminals. Obviously, these crime syndicates exist because of the illegitimate public demand which cannot otherwise be met due to legal prohibitions. The possibility of enormous profits involved in the fulfillment of these illegal demands is perhaps the main consideration involved in the organization of criminal syndicates. Criminal syndicates make huge profits, and it is primarily due to these organized criminals that many profiteers secure monopolies in illegal operation of service criminals. These monopolies are procured by persuasion, intimidation, violence and even murder. More often than not, these gangsters are extended protection and shelter by law-abiding persons in carrying on their criminal activities for soliciting an illegal service. Crime syndicates are masterminded by highly skilled and professional gang leaders. Commenting on the working of crime syndicates, David Ressler observed that despite known arrest records and well-documented criminal statistics, the leading gangsters often remain, for the most part of their career, immune from prosecution and punishment, although underlings of their gangs may at times be prosecuted and punished. The quasi-immunity of top-level mobsters can be ascribed to what is popularly known as fix. The fix is not always direct payment of money to law enforcement officials, but may also come about through the acquisition of political power, by contributions of political organizations, or by creating economic ties with apparently respectable businessmen and lawyers, and by buying public goodwill through charities, contributions and press relations. Third is criminal rackets. Racketeering in criminal world is the practice of systematic extortion under some kind of threat, usually of personal injury or property. Donald Taft defines racketeering as an organized crime in which the criminal elements perform a service to such members of society who are normally engaged in some legitimate business activity. Racketing differs from an organized predatory crime in as much as some kind of service is essentially involved in it, and therefore, it is not completely exploitative. It also differs from a criminal syndicate, as the service involved in a racket is rendered to those who are normally engaged in legitimate activities, while in case of syndicates, the service is altogether illegal and prohibited. It is thus evident that opportunities for racketeering increase when business is not within the legal limits or is marginally within the limits, and legitimate recourse to police help for its protection is not possible. Persons who are exploited by the racketeers are sometimes convinced of the value of services taken by them even at the cost of their own exploitation. Thus, it can be safely adduced that organized racketeering is nothing but an illegal exploitation for some legitimate or illegitimate demand. In the present competitive economy, the individual business organizers as well as labor unions frequently depend on criminal rackets for improving their bargaining capacity. At times, this involves the use of force and compulsion, which ultimately leads to threats of violence and coercion. Some of the major rackets which commonly operate may be mentioned here. Business labor racket. Within the area of legitimate enterprise, the law courts, police and the governments are acting as supervisors to restrain and guide the competitive processes. The employers always try to make huge profits, whereas the labor wants high wages. Thus, the interest of these two classes often lead to a conflict in pursuit of their desired ends. The employers resort to illegitimate means by utilizing unorganized workers and racketeers to jeopardize the bargaining capacity of the labor, thus grabbing huge profits for themselves. For example, there are cases when organizers of even most reputed industrial establishments muster many non-existent and fictitious names on their payrolls as laborers and thus draw huge sums in their names for months through an organized racket. In yet another type of labor racket, salary by the racketeers is drawn in the name of certain fictitious persons who do not actually come for work, but their attendance at work is marked by the interested persons who are participating in the racket. Labor rackets are also frequently found to operate in dockyards where speedy commercial transactions are involved. These racketeers keep the labor situation well under control and in return extract huge sums of money from the employers. Gambling racket. There is yet another type of racket operating as gambling racket in shape of organized crime. The tendency of the people to take chance and try their luck, coupled with the hope of gaining something out of nothing, is perhaps the main consideration which underlines the gambling rackets. Horse races, animal combats and ball games are some of the common forms of gambling in which organized racketeering often flourishes. Unfortunately, anti-gambling laws have totally failed to suppress this menace because of the inherent tendency of men to speculate and try their fortune. Moreover, in recent years, the state lotteries run by state governments sufficiently suggest that even the government accepts gambling as a potential source for raising revenue and improving the financial resources. Other criminal rackets, they are found in abundance in the commercial world and business organizations. In many cases, racketeering is carried on as a regular occupation. A racket of the fake recruiting personnel was unearthed by the Superintendent of Police, Meerut, on 5th of March 1975. It was led by one Ravilal Sharma, who allegedly recruited young men to the army with bogus certificates of education and age and fictitious addresses. In return, he charged huge sums of money from his victims. Several employees of the Meerut recruiting office were also involved in this racket. The Central Bureau of Investigation busted a transport department racket in Delhi on 22nd of June 1995, wherein 6 motor vehicle inspectors along with 4 touts were caught red-handed dividing the day's bribe amount of Rs 1.27 lakhs at the Burari office of North Delhi. The bribe was collected for issuing licenses and certificates regarding roadworthiness of vehicles, etc. The case aptly highlights the magnitude of criminality which persists in certain public offices in form of organized rackets. The racket carrying on illegal sale of alcohol and narcotics, abortion, illegal service to the underworld criminals, fraudulent reports and testimony in accident cases and similar such activities work in close liaison with persons engaged in medical profession with the motive of earning huge profits. Likewise, rackets selling fake degrees and mark sheets to needy persons are operating in several parts of India. Obviously, they carry on their illegal activities in liaison with some of the university employees who assist them in procuring necessary information and material for this purpose. Criminal rackets involved in flesh trade and sale of women and girls for the purpose of prostitution are common news items in newspapers to be read almost every day. Despite stringent legal measures such as Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956 and the provisions of the Indian Penal Code, the repression of prostitution has not been possible. The problem being more of a social and economic nature needs to be tackled through better social and economic planning rather than social legislation alone. The recent developments in information technology and internet services have opened new opportunities for these rackets operators, not only nationwide but also worldwide. Fourth is a political graft. There is a general belief that persons of high status carrying on some legitimate business and professional criminals are interconnected through political grafts. In order to assume political power and parties' victory at the polls, the politicians generally seek the support of notorious offenders and utilize them for illegal practices to accomplish their political ends. This utilization of notorious criminals by the politicians for political gains is commonly known as political graft. These grafts resort to all kinds of legitimate or illegitimate methods to bring success to their employers at polls. At times, these hired professional offenders do not even hesitate to resort to violence and threats to make voters cast their vote in favor of the candidate for whom they are working. Instances are not wanting when some professional voters have been found to vote at more than one place for different electorates. Thus, vote buying is a common example of political graft. Some of the characteristic features of organized criminals who are associated with various types of organized crimes deserve particular mention. The sense of unity and solidarity among these criminals is perhaps the root cause of their success in their criminal ventures. It is primarily for this reason that detection of organized crimes has always been a difficult problem for the police and other law enforcement agencies. Organized criminals have their own leaders, and members of the gang work in perfect harmony and understanding. They have their own codes of ethics. There are instances when such participants have preferred death rather than divulging the secret of their associates. That apart, a perfect division at labor is to be found in the gangs of organized criminals, and the members are assigned specific duties in furtherance of a particular organized activity. Thus, the criminals associated with liquor syndicate have a variety of activities to perform in their illegal business. Some of them are entrusted the job of procuring liquor, while others are to manipulate its transmission to the customers. A few of the criminals in the syndicate are to act as watchdogs and keep their fellow criminals alert from the dangers of police or other detective agencies so as to escape arrest and punishment. Besides this, one or two members from the group assume the role of leaders to supervise the smooth working of the syndicate and keep these participants well under control. The task of distribution of booty or earnings to different members of the organization is generally performed by the ringleader of the gang. Besides perfect unity and division of labor, organized criminal gangs have to act in close liaison with other organized criminal groups. They cannot afford to be hostile or indifferent to other gangs which are carrying on some other parallel criminal activity. For example, those indulging in gambling dens have to remain in touch with the illicit liquor suppliers and perhaps also with the gang dealing with prostitution. At times, two or more organized criminal gangs carry on their respective criminal activities side by side in perfect harmony and mutual understanding without interfering with the business activities of the other. The obvious reason for this mutual trust and cooperation among the criminal gangs carrying on different activities is their consciousness that slight confrontation with other gang might lead to their detection by the police, which would mean destruction, ruin and disbanding of the gang. With the developing economy, industrial growth and modernization, the scope of activities for different types of criminal organizations has considerably widened. Today, criminality in an organized form is known to exist on national as well as international plane. Smuggling, illicit sale of wine and women, Pickpocketing, dacoity and gambling are operating throughout India despite intensive police vigil. There are interstate gangs carrying on these organized crimes as a regular business. The case of notorious American swindler Walcott, who was convicted in India, is a glaring illustration indicating the operation of organized crimes on an international level. The gangs of organized criminals operating all over the globe and carrying out their criminal activities undeterred by repressive measures of the law enforcement agencies amply reflect upon their organizational skill, spirit of mutual trust and cooperation and loyalty to their fellow men. At the same time, it casts aspersions on the efficacy of the police and detective agencies to tackle these organized offenders effectively. It further makes it clear that even the professional criminals do have regard for the virtues of devotion, honesty, loyalty and fellowmanship, and if these noble qualities in them are properly channelized, there is no reason why they cannot be turned into law-abiding members of the society. So, in general, organized crime has teamwork, hierarchical structure, planning, centralized authority, reserved funds, division of labor and monopoly as some of the important characteristics of an organized crime or organized criminals. After independence, organized crime in India expanded into a wider range of activities and extended over large geographical areas. The single event of which brought about the greatest change in organized crime was the idea of prohibition, forbidding by law the sale and distribution of alcoholic beverages. Organized crime was able to provide illegal liquor demand by a large number of people. So many groups or gangs came to be engaged in manufacturing illicit liquor that they started fighting with one another. Inter-rivalries amongst them led to widespread use of violence. Quite a few of these gangs finally dominated the scene. In 1970s, many of these gangs extended their activities to drug trafficking. Some gangs or syndicates started supplying illicit arms to insurgents, terrorists, Naxalites and agitators. The modern era of organized crime is represented by the crime syndicate. Organized crime has been expanded to the point where policemen, political leaders, law officers, etc. have also come to be associated with the gangs and syndicates. Many gang leaders contest elections to assemblies, parliament, municipal corporations and gram panchayats, thereby securing political status which enables them to widen their social contacts and use the influence of powerful people for escaping arrest after committing these crimes. These gangs and syndicates today not only enjoy large financial gains, but also enjoy immunity from interference and possess monopolistic control in large geographical areas. We take up a case study of organized wild skin trading. Organized crime in the form of illegal trading in wildlife, both at the national and international level, has created a situation wherein it is being felt that wildlife in India, far from being safe, is in great danger. The most notorious wildlife crime kingpin, 55-year-old Sansar Chand, who was in jail since 2005 and accused of having killed more than 200 tigers besides thousands of other wildlife species and wiping out the entire tiger population in Sariska, has been acquitted by the Delhi court on 12th of July 2013. He was arrested 10 times prior to his arrest in Delhi in 2005. He provided several clues to the CBI and confessed the existence of an organized crime syndicate engaged in large-scale operation across various wildlife sanctuaries in India and trading in skins of more than 680 animals of various wildlife species like those of tigers, leopards, pythons, spotted deer, Indian gazelle, jackals, jungle cats, toady cats, red foxes, desert cats, wolves, crocodiles, wild hare, mongoose, etc. There have been more than 57 cases of wildlife organized crime registered against him ever since 1974, but lack of evidence and shady investigation led to his acquittal even after he was caught red-handed with tiger skin. While he was in prison since June 2005, his wife, sons and daughters were carrying out the illegal organized wildlife trade. Sansar Chand's wife was also convicted for illegal wildlife trading under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 in September 2012 and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. Organized crimes have always persisted in Indian society in some form or another. Various laws have been established with respect to various organized crimes. Some of them are as follows. Laws under Indian Penal Code. Section 120A of the Indian Penal Code defines criminal conspiracy, which states about the involvement of two or more persons in an illegal act by illegal means. Section 120B of Indian Penal Code provides punishment for criminal conspiracy. Section 364A of Indian Penal Code defines kidnapping for ransom. Section 391 of Indian Penal Code defines dacoity. If 5 or more persons commit the offence of robbery, then they commit dacoity. Section 395 of Indian Penal Code defines punishment for dacoity, which includes imprisonment for life or rigorous imprisonment up to 10 years and 5 months. Section 399 of Indian Penal Code deals with criminals' preparation to commit dacoity. Section 400 of Indian Penal Code criminalizes the act of belonging to a gang of persons associated for the purpose of habitually committing dacoities. Section 402 of Indian Penal Code deals with assembly for the purpose of committing dacoity. Then Act against gangsters. An act was found in Uttar Pradesh to suppress gang activities. It is called Uttar Pradesh Gangster and Antisocial Activity Prevention Act 1986, which is applicable in the state only. Under section 3 of this act, a gangster is punishable with minimum imprisonment of 2 years, extendable up to 10 years. Other laws and acts. The Customs Act 1962, the Narcotics, Drug and Psychotropic Substances Act 1884, the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956, the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1973, the Public Gambling Act 1987 are some other deterrent activities. Terrorism and related organized international crimes are yet another form of organized crime operating not only within the country, but in every corner of the world. Terrorism has become increasingly transactional in nature. The commonly accepted definition of terrorism is that it is a form of exercising power by systematically provoking alarm, fright or horror. It includes 4 main characteristics, that is, it is exercised by organized groups for intimidating civilians or non-combatants. It is inspired by political motives. There is a systematic and indiscriminate use of violence and breach of law. The use may be in assassination, hijacking, sabotage, biological or chemical agents, explosives, arms, firearms, lethal weapons or nuclear weapons or devices. And finally, the use of violence is intended to arouse fright or alarm. Terrorism may be defined as an activity of a person in a group using explosives or inflammable substances or fire alarms or other lethal weapons or noxious gases or other chemicals or any other substance of a hazardous nature with the aim to strike terror in the society or any section thereof and with an intent to scare the constitution established by law. According to Kilocklin, terrorism is used by insurgents with an objective to change the status quo through subversion and violence. Austin Turk defines terrorism as an organized political violence, lethal or non-lethal, designated to deter opposition by maximizing fear, specifically by random targeting of people or sites. The basic objective of all terrorist activities is to create an emotional state of extreme fear among the specific groups and thereby bring about changes in the political behavior of a particular government. The terrorists think that by indulging in violent, unethical tactics like hijacking, ruthless killing by bombing and spread of violence, they can achieve their goals. Terrorism is also aimed at deliberately provoking repression, reprisal and spread of violence in order to overthrow a government which in their view is unpopular. Sometimes this kind of ruthless violence is spread by terrorists to satisfy their illegitimate demands like release of their comrades or payment of ransom by the government in power. It has been universally accepted that terrorism is the principal challenge today to plural and democratic societies. It not only destroys human life and property, but also endangers democratic values, social harmony and economic well-being. A nation's strategy should not be restricted only to deal with the perpetrators of terrorism, but it should also seek to modify the behavior of the states where terrorists find safe haven, refuge and material subsistence. In order to achieve their aim, terrorists commit offences such as homicide, hijacking, hostage taking, robbery, extortion and their victims are usually leading politicians, VIPs, high military personnel, etc. The terrorists often argue that they are fighting for a noble cause, for combating an unfair system or regime which is in operation on principle of injustice and intent to re-establish a legal order. Whatever be the motive behind these organized law violators in the form of terrorists, the fact remains that their activities result in mass destruction of men and material and they pose a positive danger to the community or nation as a whole. When terrorism operates internationally, it poses a threat to international peace and security. In India, there are two vital agencies to collect information about terrorists. The Intelligence Bureau, called IB, collects internal intelligence, and Research and Analysis Wing or RAW deals with external intelligence. Their task is to control, regulate, neutralize and snuff out the terrorists, insurgents and so on, operating from within or outside the country. At the international level, hijacking, piracy, illegal transaction of firearms, explosives, contrabands, goods, money laundering, etc. are some of the criminal activities which are carried on in the form of organized crime. War crimes against any civil population before or during conflict are also covered under the category of international organized crime. It must be stated that modernized telecommunication services and information technology have proved a boon for criminal conspiracies, and just as legitimate organizations in the private and public sectors rely on information systems for communication and record keeping, so too are activities of criminal organizations enhanced by technology. The use of encryption technology may place criminal communications beyond the reach of law enforcement agencies. The use of computer networks to produce and distribute pornographic material has become a serious subject of attention, as these materials can be imported across national borders in the shortest possible time. Again, digital technology permits reproduction and easy dissemination of print, graphics, sound and multimedia combinations. The temptation to reproduce copyrighted material for personal use, for sale at a lower price or for free distribution has caused considerable concern to owners of copyrighted material. Organized criminal gangs are involved in such crimes at national and international level. It may be concluded that with the widespread use of electronic communication and rise of internet to handle things such as e-trading, shopping, banking, etc., the security and reliability of these networks need to be assured for the well-being of trade, commerce and industry. The emerging trend of cyber crimes which are committed in an organized manner necessitates adequate legal measures to be initiated to ensure that perpetrators of such crime are held accountable for their illegal activities. The International Chamber of Commerce has established an anti-cyber crime unit which will work in cooperation with Interpol to combat organized cyber crimes. In the wake of these new developments in modern science and technology, there has been unprecedented increase in opportunities and resources for organized crimes all over the world. Now, this is the time for your self-study. If you want to learn more for enhancing your knowledge, you may log on to our website www.cec.nic.in for assignments, MCQs, quizzes and LORs and other materials.